Thank you all for being here. Let's start right in. Ms. Ayala, in your one term as the state attorney for the Orange Osceola Circuit, of course, what was noteworthy was your insistence that that no death penalty cases be prosecuted. Why was that the right course of action?
Well, allow me to say it wasn't that they should not be prosecuted. It's that I was concerned about the sentence. I took an oath to pursue the justice, and defining justice looks at several different things. So in my research, what I was able to find is that in Florida, we spend $51 million every single year to keep the death penalty going. I also found out that Florida leads the nation in death row exonerations. All the research also points to it has not been proven to be a deterrent. States such as Florida, who have the death penalty, also have the highest homicide rates. So when I looked at it and knowing that we needed to pursue justice, we're looking at a budget crisis. It was my thought that the pursuit of justice would mean a life without the possibility of parole versus all of the other cases. And during that time also, if you will remember, the Hearst case, which had overturned Florida's death penalty process twice in less than 2 years by both the Florida Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court, I was in line with those things. And I believe that as the state attorney, it was necessary for us to look at data-based policies. We are attorneys, that is our responsibility. And I did what I believed the law supported and what the evidence supported.
And what would you do regarding the death penalty if you were elected Attorney General?
As Attorney General, I think it's important to know that we still have to look at those facts. So each time that we're looking at a appeal on death penalty, we have to look at the amount of money that we're spending. We have to make certain that we are engaging in conviction integrity so that if we are going to pursue the death penalty and allow that to stand, that we are getting it right. And then we also have to look at the deterrent effect. So I think it has to be an approach that looks at all of the issues that are proposed by the death penalty before we proceed.
Question from Dan Sweeney. Go ahead, Dan.
Can't hear him.
Yeah. Dan, go ahead and turn your mic on. Yeah.
Ms. Ayala, since those state Supreme Court and U.S. Supreme Court decisions, the Florida Supreme Court has decided that it no longer will consider proportionality in death penalty cases. Does this make it more or less likely that death penalty cases will be ruled out at the state level, or you'll advise state attorneys not to pursue them as Attorney General?
I think that those are decisions for the prosecutors. When my discretion was questioned, I believe that it was a local issue for my discretion. And I don't believe that those are things that the state level should be infringing upon. And as Attorney General, I would not do the same. I do think that, again, we still have to look at the standards and the concerns, which are evidentiary as attorneys, and the pursuit of justice, that is what is in the best interest of the people, including the budget, including the justice, and certainly including public safety.
Question, Martin Dyckman.
I don't, excuse me, I don't say Mr. Uhlfelder on the screen, but my question would apply to both you and Ms. Ayala and him. The Attorney General is responsible for representing the state in all appeals. Now, Mr. Uhlfelder has said he would not prosecute any doctors or women for abortions, but he's not the the Attorney General is not the lead person, the point person in those cases. Those are filed by local prosecutors. However, my question in general is, what flexibility does the Attorney General of a state have not to defend the state's interests when the case comes to an appeals court? I'll start with you first, Ms. Ayala.
When it comes to the appellate level, I think that it is important for the Attorney General to consider the Constitution, to consider all of the information that has been posed. What happens at the trial court level is all of the information, all the facts and evidence. The court makes evidentiary findings, whether it's in motions or at trials, juries do that. And it is incumbent upon the appellate level to not just consider the facts, but also to consider the legal ramifications of those decisions. The appellate court looks at the record. The appellate court considers all the additional information, or it looks at what the arguments have been presented in the court. And I think that it is at the appellate level, their responsibility to look at the entire record and to consider the long-term impact of each individual case. I think it's also important for them to correspond with the local state attorney so that in making these decisions, there is local impact and local influence.
Mr. Uhlfelder, your comment, you said you would not prosecute you said you would not prosecute abortion cases. Does that apply to all cases, even those of under the present law?
Yes, as I said, within moments after the Dobbs decision was leaked, I made it clear that as Attorney General, I would not use the resources of the Office of the State Attorney General to prosecute women or girls or doctors that are involved in performing abortion. And that decision, that announcement has been followed and reiterated by attorney generals, elected attorney generals all over the country, state attorneys within this state, state attorneys throughout the country, and I stand by that.
Let me bring in Jim Lewis into the conversation. And Jim, do you agree with what Mr. Uhlfelder just said?
I do 100%.
Okay.
To add to it.
And what about the death penalty?
Well, I hear what Ms. Ayala is saying. I'm very concerned. Number one, I think it's really important we get a Democrat elected to this position. And taking that position against the death penalty means you're not going to get elected. You're going to be easy fodder for the Attorney General Moody in this particular case. You know, we look at the Parkland case. To me right now, if that jury comes up with a recommendation of death and that judge sentences him to death, we can't have an attorney general who's going to say, I'm not going to follow through with it, or I'm really concerned about it. That would be a slap in the face to all those victims' families, and we can't be concerned about it. But quite frankly, anybody that takes that position into the general election has no chance to win. So I think that's a horrible position to take. The death penalty is a law. I think it ought to be safe for the worst of the worst. I have some reservations about it as well, in terms of making sure only innocent people aren't executed. But again, it's our law. Most people agree with it. I think it needs to stay on the books. And again, I think Ms. Ayala's position makes her unelectable.
It sounds to me, Jim Lewis, and don't let me put words in your mouth, sir. It sounds to me like you're saying that the death penalty needs to be upheld because it's politically popular in Florida.
Not because it's politically popular. I think it's correct. I think it ought to be the worst of the worst. The Ted Bundys of the world should be executed. You know, it's not something we need. We leave it up to the state attorneys. That's correct. But as an attorney general, you got to follow the law, and it is the law now. And I personally agree with it. My personal opinion is that some people deserve the death penalty. And, you know, I've spent a career representing, both prosecuting and representing people in that case. I've had over 30 murder trials. I have somebody on death row as a prosecutor and somebody on death row as a defense attorney. So I know what it's about. I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I believe it is a deterrent to some extent. To some of the worst of the worst, it is a deterrent. They don't want to die.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that very much. And I'm going to bring in, I got one more quick question, then I'm going to call on my colleague, Chris Fluker, in a second. But Daniel Uhlfelder, I want to ask you, sir, just, you know, the Attorney General's not directly involved in this case, but speaking as a candidate, speaking as an attorney, speaking as an advocate, do you support or oppose the death penalty for Nicholas Cruz, the killer in the Parkland case?
One of the people that has been an early supporter of mine, and it's become a close friend of mine over the years, is Fred Guttenberg. When I grew up in Tallahassee. I remember to this day having a slumber party with my friends, and the city of Tallahassee being terrified because a man was roaming the streets who had raped and killed a girl from Lake City who was 12 years old. He had bludgeoned to death co-eds at Florida State University. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I don't know what I would do. I believe the death penalty is appropriate in certain circumstances, certainly for Ted Bundy, certainly for Nicholas Cruz.
Fair enough. Chris Fluker. Go ahead, Chris.
I did want to follow up on one thing that was mentioned, and that is conviction integrity. Florida knows at this point that there are some elements, including some categories of forensic evidence and some practices, such as the use of snitches or jailhouse informants, that are highly associated with wrongful convictions. As Attorney General, two-part question. As Attorney General, do you believe that Florida needs a statewide Office of Conviction Integrity? And then if so, what criteria should that office use to choose the kinds of cases it takes? And let's start with Mr. Lewis, please.
Well, I can tell you that's exactly what my plan would be inside the Attorney General's office, to set up a separate conviction integrity office. And I know some of the state attorneys have done that, and I applaud them, but I think the Attorney General has ultimate responsibility. You know, the fact that an innocent man could be put to death, to me, is crazy. And the fact that Ashley Moody actually opposed some of the state attorneys in allowing DNA testing for people on death row is absolutely crazy. But I think above all, while I do believe in the death penalty, I think, and even other cases, people sentenced to 30 years or life, their cases should be reviewed as well. And if there's any, again, I'm all for doing everything we can to exonerate innocent people, and I would set up that office. That'd be one of the first things I would do, and I'd put competent people in there. And when we field, we'll look at all cases that we can. Obviously, there's a lot of cases in Florida, but the ones that are out there where the state attorneys maybe are giving up, I would take that extra step to look.
Ms. Ayala, you set up one of the first conviction
I did.
integrity units in the state. So I'd like to hear from you on the criteria as well that you think should be used to
Absolutely.
choose cases.
I think that it is important to build upon the work that I did as state attorney to establish actual innocence. See, there's two different levels of where we're looking at conviction integrity to see, oh, the state couldn't prove that they're not guilty. That is not the standard. I think the standard should be actual innocence. And that actual innocence was written out in my policy as the state attorney, where we looked at information that you mentioned, whether it was jailhouse snitches, whether it was misidentification. We have cross-cultural misidentification issues. We have additional new DNA tools. We have new information where we were able to, the cross-examination had exposed things. Some of the court rulings may have not allowed additional time or additional testimony on certain issues, and we went to explore those. The first level is to determine whether there are legal grounds upon which we can, and then whether there are manifest injustice, which is the second standard by which we set. So any conviction integrity at the AG's office would be built upon the work that I did. I just think that it's important to note, while my opponent is saying, well, we shouldn't revisit these death penalty cases, for these reasons, he's also saying that we should have conviction integrity. So knowing that we lead the nation in death row exonerations, it is important to have an attorney general who's experienced enough to know that we should not just say what people want to hear, but we should do what is consistent and what is truthful and what is just.
Mr. Uhlfelder.
Certainly, I agree that we need to have what you're saying in terms of the state attorney general. We need to be certain that what we have here in this country and in this state is we have a disparate system of criminal justice. Those who have money and means are able to get different treatment. I mean, look at the former president of the United States. He's a criminal and he's walking free. Florida needs to lead the country in conviction integrity. We need to lead the country in people saying, if someone is sentenced to this sentence and they are this date, we need to be leading the country in this. There's no reason why we should not be leading the country in this on this issue. We are the third largest state in the country. We have enormous resources, financial resources. We have an attorney general's office that employs hundreds of lawyers. And certainly there is no reason, and this will be a priority on day one, that we take this seriously and we do something about it. And I would appoint the best people I could find to work on this and make sure that we have the #1 office in the country statewide to handle this, because it is critically important that we have integrity in our criminal justice system. And right now, I do not believe we have that.
Thank you.
Let me call on Dan Sweeney. Go ahead, Dan. And turn your mic on.
Mr. Uhlfelder, regarding the what you said about not prosecuting abortion cases, are you referring just to cases that would violate the 15-week abortion ban that was passed this year, or you were talking about any other of the myriad abortion laws in the state, the 24-hour waiting period, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
The Florida Constitution. We are one of the few states in the country that has in our Constitution the right to privacy. It was put there in 1980. It was put there as a result of 1978 Constitution Revision Commission. which happened to be chaired by one of my lifelong mentors and heroes, Sandy Dallenberg. My father was actually executive director of that commission. That the right to privacy is the most sacrosanct right there is between a woman, a girl, and her doctor. And I would not waste the resources of the Attorney General's office. If you look at it operationally, it's primarily a civil litigation, consumer protection, environmental protection, voting rights. The only criminal aspect of the Attorney General office is appeals of criminal cases and multi-jurisdictional crimes, because most crimes are prosecuted by a state attorney, and whether there's the office of statewide prosecutor for certain cases. No, I am not going to waste the resources of the Attorney General's office of the state of Florida interfering with the rights of privacy between a woman and her doctor. No, I will not.
So that's any anti-abortion state laws, not just 15-week ban. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other state laws you can conceive of that the Attorney General's office under you would not would not have an appeal on, would basically throw aside, or is it just the abortion ones?
Right now, we have an attack on the rights of women across this country. It's an attack. We've had 50 years of precedent. This is an attack on the fundamental rights of Floridians. This issue is so important that I'm willing to take this stand on this issue. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me see if Martin had his hand up, but so did Anthony Mann. I want to bring Anthony Mann into the conversation. Go ahead, Anthony.
Thanks, Steve. Ms. Ayala, could you directly address a follow-up to one of the questions that was posed to one of the other candidates? Your view of the death penalty, particularly as it applies to Nicholas Cruz.
I do believe that it is important for us to look at the feelings that people have. As state attorneys, I have listened and talked to families who want the death penalty. I have sat and talked to them and understand the pain. I myself lost my best friend at the age of 18 to gun violence, shot in her head. Dionne Braddock was her name. These are very real issues that have emotions tied to them. The horrendous act, when it comes to what occurred in Parkland, unfortunately cannot change the failed policy of death penalty. We have to be able to have a system that works. And if we're going to continue to use families of victims and use them to justify the use of a failed system, we're continuing to harm families. I think that in this case, we need to be able to have a conversation with the family and advise them and let them know that there are two different things here. And the key in this situation is to worry about the guns, not the response to killing their children. The death penalty is not going to bring back their children. Getting guns off the street and not letting those who kill kids and go into schools and go into communities and kill, getting those guns off the street. The focus must be on prevention and not necessarily the back end response to kids being killed.
Can I answer that as well,
Yes.
Mr. Mann?
Yes.
You know, we have a 12-0 recommendation would be required. We've changed the law to make it difficult to execute people now, but there are those cases that absolutely cry out for it. And this is one of them. And what I'm afraid of, if Ms. Ayala is elected and Nicholas Cruz is sentenced to death, that if she doesn't follow through with that, you're going to have a Republican legislature that's going to seek to impeach her and remove possibly the only Democrat that we would have in the statewide level. I mean, Nicholas Cruz deserves the death penalty richly.
He might, but do we deserve to kill him? That's the question. He may deserve it, but do we deserve to kill?
Absolutely, we do.
Based
Absolutely,
upon what?
we as a community have a right to take vengeance, if that's what you want to call it, when somebody kills 17 kids. We do. It's
vengeance, not justice.
It's not the biblical times.
Vengeance, not justice.
It's necessary
The
sometimes.
attorneys general are supposed to engage in the pursuit of justice, not vengeance. Because if we're on the other side of vengeance, what happens when you're upset at the LGBTQ community? What happens when you're upset with Black and Hispanic community? What happens? We should not be pursuing and moving the concept of vengeance as leaders. That's exactly how we got here with Mr. Trump.
When you kill 17 kids in a school under those circumstances and see what those families had to go through, there's no other sentence that's just. And the fact that we've had problems with the death penalty in the past, we've worked a lot of those out and we've worked through it. And I'm confident now in the system that we're not going to be executing an innocent person. And he's not innocent. We know he's not. And he deserves the death penalty richly. And as an attorney general, you got to realize you're the top law enforcement officer in the state.
I do, and that I do recognize that, and that's the key.
To be
Let me jump in here. One moment. One moment, Ms. Ayala. First of all, let me say we greatly appreciate the vigorous exchange of opinions here. Please respect when the other person's talking. I know it's difficult. Ms. Ayala, you have the floor. Go ahead.
I was saying that 60% of Floridians do not agree with the death penalty, and it is nothing but political to use a moment where families have had the most worst tragedy that they can imagine to now to side with something that doesn't represent the bulk of Floridians, that doesn't represent justice, that doesn't represent fiscal responsibility, that doesn't represent a deterrent, that only represents your feelings, your anger, and your desire to seek vengeance. That's not the direction that we should go. And I know that you talk about being a prosecutor from the 80s, but we cannot continue to that history, and we need to move forward with policies and evidence-based values that actually work and produce more public safety.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lewis, go ahead. Brief response, Jim. Go ahead.
You know, this state was great when we had people like Lawton Childs and Bob Graham and conservative Democrats that helped run the state. They were able to work across the aisle. And the problem is now all we want to do is fight with each other. We have the far left and the far right. Extreme partisan politics is going to be the death of us, and it's going to be the death of the Democratic Party. We've got to learn to realize that people in this state are in the center, and they're not way off to the left. And if you want to continue, you want to defund the police and criticize the police, you're not being a top law enforcement officer in this state. You're not going to be able to lead those cops to being better cops. You're just going to polarize people again.
Where do you get that I want to defund the police? Where do you get that from? Stop repeating things that are absolutely untrue.
Well, what you want to do
right now,
you took it on yourself. You took it on yourself to do like a sheet when you think cops are lying there in Orlando. And I asked talk to the police officers in Orlando what they think of you, Miss Ayala.
Don't lie and say that I want to defund the police.
What you want to do is you want to
regain control of
the scorecard as to whether you think they're believable or not, and keep a scorecard so that you can use them because you think they're bad cops because they, and that's wrong. You need to be the top cop. You need to lead them to be better, not to just criticize them and say that all cops are liars. And we need to be careful because we've got dangerous cops and they're out there to attack all the minorities. That's not true. We have a lot of good cops in this state that want to do the right thing. And you, as the Attorney General, or me, or Mr. Uhlfelder, need to be able to lead them to be better.
Okay, let's move on. I want to first of all, Anthony Mann. I'm not sure you got completed your questioning round, so. Go ahead, Tony.
I'm good. I'll go.
Okay. All right. Who has a question? I haven't called on my colleague Randy Schultz yet. Randy, if you have a question, go ahead. Okay.
Good morning. I'd like to ask each one of you, if you get the nomination, how you intend to campaign against Ashley Moody. What do you think you would highlight to persuade enough voters in Florida that they should vote for you?
Mr. Uhlfelder.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very critical, important question. I would run against Ashley Moody on a number of issues. First of all, Ashley Moody in December of 2020 signed onto a brief to overturn a valid election. Her own attorneys in her office said the legal theory was batshit insane. In my opinion, in the opinion of lawyers and jurists such as Martha Barnett, former Chief Justice Charlie Wells, who's supporting me, Bob Butterworth, who's supporting me, Alex Sink, I have judges and attorneys across the state, some of them who supported Ms. Moody, all agreed that when she signed her name to that brief on behalf of 22 million Floridians, she disqualified herself to that position. Next, Florida is becoming unlivable. It's too expensive. Our utility rates, our homeowners insurance rates, our rental rates. I'm having people contact me or telling me because of their homeowners insurance rates going up so much that they're having to potentially live in their cars. And why are all these things happening? Because we have an attorney general who is getting paid by these people. I have done as much of a forensic audit as I can of her campaign contributions. They are loaded up with Florida Power and Light, insurance, tobacco, real estate developers. She has no incentive to go after these companies. And when I go around the state, I live in Walton County. 75% of my county voted for Donald Trump twice. Clearly, I wasn't one of those people, but we have to be able to listen to people we may not agree with. And when I travel the state and when I talk to people in this community, I ask them, are your rental rates higher? Are your insurance rates higher? Are your utility rates higher? And everyone raised their hand. It doesn't have to be a Democrat, a Republican, or independent. And I'm going to nail her to the wall on these issues because she has said nothing and she has done nothing. Reproductive rights. She is a part of an effort to attack the fundamental rights of women in this state. There is so much material, but I'm going to focus on her attack on our democracy, these pocketbook issues, and her attack on reproductive rights. And I'm going to beat her.
Okay. Ms. Ayala, I want you to address Randy Schultz's question as well.
I think that she's the most vulnerable when it comes to all constitutional issues. You know, in 2010, Floridians voted for the Fair Districts Act. And then she decides that we're going to allow the decimation of those congressional districts, diluting the majority minority districts, waiting for the governor to ask for an advisory opinion from the Supreme Court. She should have issued an advisory opinion. So our right to vote, our right to privacy, our right to marry who we want to marry, all of the issues that impact Democrats, and those issues, education, you know, children needing to be educated and not indoctrinated. These are the constitutional issues that I think she's extremely vulnerable, and especially me as a pro-choice woman having a race for attorney general against a anti-choice woman is going to definitely be heated up. I don't have to be careful about the conversation. I have my own stories, personal, not someone else's stories, that I'm happy to share with the people and go into this of why health care does include abortion. The other thing that she's extremely vulnerable about is public safety. Unfortunately for her, public safety is not gotten better on her watch. When we talk about public safety, it's not just mass incarceration. Public safety also includes firearms, getting the guns off the street so that we don't have to deal with these mass shootings, so we don't have to deal with fearing where we go. And of course, the economy. When it comes to, you know, failing to investigate these fraudulent insurance companies who pack up and leave, you know, after they've collected all the premiums when a hurricane hits. These are the issues that really need to be lifted up, and I'm happy to articulate them and overcome any of the concerns that people have about what happens very few times in the state. You can talk about death penalty as a hot topic issue, but everyone's facing issues with affordable housing. Everyone's facing issues with fraud. Everyone's facing issues with insurance companies, and all women are facing the fight for our own bodily autonomy.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Lewis.
Ashley Moody and Governor DeSantis are poster childs for everything that's wrong with government in Florida. In fact, government throughout the country. Florida, like the rest of the country, has become a pay-to-play political platform. In other words, those that have money make large campaign contributions. They use political action committees. They thwart any laws having to do with money. So money runs politics. This is a pay-to-play state. And to see the amount of money that both she and the governor have amassed from special interests, the fact that they hire out-of-state law firms, and Ashley Moody signs upon this, to represent us in bullcrap lawsuits like the Don't Say Gay bill and the mask mandates, that they hire these lawyers when they have 350 perfectly good lawyers in the Attorney General's office that could do that. She hires these lawyers, pay millions of dollars, and then those same lawyers give large campaign contributions to their political action committees. How wrong is that? That is corrupt. And I'm going to run on this thing that I want to change things. I want to take money out of politics. I've committed only to spend $25,000 in this primary race. And if I'm lucky enough to go forward, yeah, we'll spend a lot more. But I want to take money out of politics. It's just crazy. Yes, it's legal, but it doesn't make it right. The fact that money, somebody can just give $10 million to a campaign, to a political action committee. How wrong is that? You know, everyday people who are out here working, who are fighting to pay their rents and fighting to pay groceries, have no say in government anymore. It's only the people that have the money. And I believe the citizens are going to wake up and they're going to say, you know what, we want a guy who doesn't take a lot of money. Okay, we want maybe a more mature guy who's in the middle that will work across the aisle and take on some of Florida's problems. Okay, we don't want somebody that's so partisan. I mean, I don't want Donald Trump to be president again. I certainly don't want Governor DeSantis to be president. And we've got to protect the small guy ability to have a say in government. And while if we continue to reward people, and the media is responsible for this too, because you write off every politician who doesn't raise a lot of money. You just write them off because they can't win. Well, I think there's a different day and time. We saw where a guy in New Jersey spent like $50 and beat the most powerful politician in that state. And I think people in Florida are smart enough to wake up and smell the coffee too, that when they see all these billboards and TV ads, that's not a person for them, because that's a person that's being backed by special interests and doesn't care about them. And if I'm lucky enough to win this primary, I'm going to run is try to be the people's attorney general, to stand up for the small guys, to stand up against all this dark money and big money, because it has no place, it should have no place in government.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a question for Daniel Uhlfelder. This is a partisan elected political office. And one of these days, the Democrats are going to start figuring out a way to start winning statewide elections again. My question, Daniel, is this. Aramis Ayala has been elected state attorney in one of the biggest circuits in the state, smack in the middle of the I-4 corridor. She's a woman of color, and she is singularly identified strongly, whether you agree with her or not, with the death penalty, which is an important issue to many Floridians. Why isn't Aramis Ayala the best person for Democrats to put forward for Attorney General in November?
Let me just say this. I have the utmost respect for both of my opponents in this race. I've gotten to know them through this race. I think we've been cordial, we've been friendly. I think that running for office is a difficult thing. I respect both of them for their career and what they've done. I'm not going to just say my own words. I'm going to take the words from someone that knows Florida, somebody that knows me, somebody that knows that Ashley Moody. Her name is Martha Barnett. She told me, and you're free to talk to her, she said, you're not the only person who's running. You're the only person who can beat Ashley Moody. I am a North Florida Democrat. I am a second generation Florida native. There is nobody, all you have to do is look at my Twitter feed to see if there's anybody who has taken on the Republicans in the last several years, such as me. I've taken on Mike Huckabee. I've taken on Matt Gaetz. I've taken on Donald Trump. I've taken on Ron DeSantis. I can take these people on with a vengeance. We have to win this race. I have the ability to win this race because I can communicate on issues that have bipartisan appeal, like these economic issues, these issues about that in terms of reproductive rights. No, I'm not a female, no. But I have an 11-year-old daughter. Her name is Daisy. She's at camp right now. She's perfect. My wife and my daughter, they get so upset when I say that. My daughter, Daisy, is precious. I'm not a woman, but I am, and I'll never be able to say, but I do not want my daughter, and I don't want women or girls across the state to become second-class citizens. And my grandfather, he came to the state escaping Nazi Germany. I've seen the face of fascism. I've seen the face of autocracy, and we are staring it dead in the eye. And we cannot stand to have another 4 years of Ron DeSantis and Ashley Moody. And I'm the only candidate that can beat Ashley Moody, and I will beat Ashley Moody.
Okay. All right. Chris Fluker. Somebody I thought had their hand up. Chris, if you did, go ahead.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I wanted to ask each of you, given that the U.S. Supreme Court post-Roe may have opened the door to overturn federal protections for same-sex marriage. Do you believe that Florida's constitutional privacy provision protects the rights of LGBTQ Floridians? And also, do you see a circumstance where the 2008 amendment to the Florida Constitution that defined marriage as being restricted to one man plus one woman, do you see that amendment, which was killed by the Brenner v. Scott decision, coming back to life? And let's start with Mr. Uhlfelder.
As I said earlier, I've been very fortunate to be mentored and trained by some of Florida's best lawyers, like Sandy Dallenberg, like Don Middle. Like, the right to privacy was drafted by these folks. The right to privacy, I certainly believe, applies to what you're asking about. Is it under attack? Yes. The opinion opens the door to all sorts of attacks. And that is why we need an attorney general who can stand up to these issues. But in order to stand up to these issues, the person needs to be elected. And I'm the only one that has the ability to get elected in the general election. And I will fight for those rights because they are coming for all of them. Ron DeSantis, Ashley Moody, the Republican legislature, the Florida Supreme Court, everything is on the table. When everything's on the table, we are in dire straits because that's what we are traveling towards, an autocracy. And that's what my family escaped to come to this country. And that's part of my DNA. It is part of my DNA since I've been a young child. When I was in high school, I went to a thing called Boys State. It's supposed to be for the future leaders. There was a young man there that was mimicking Hitler. And the kids, these were the future leaders of the country, began cheering him. He started goose-stepping. They ended up giving an award to this kid. I went to the American Legion and said, this is wrong. They said, I'm sorry. Ultimately, they apologized after it was published in the front page of the Miami Herald. I have been fighting bigotry, anti-Semitism, race, since as long as I can remember. I've fought for 20 years to have a Confederate flag removed from our courthouses. We have to take the fight to them, and I will take the fight to them day in and day out, as I have done my entire career.
Chris, who's next?
Thank you. Thank you. If we could go to Ms. Ayala, the same question, and I did want you to address what you think would happen to the 2008 amendment, especially if the U.S. Supreme Court revisits Brenner v. Scott.
I do believe that the privacy provision in the Florida Constitution does protect, and as Attorney General, I would take that position. It protects the right to marriage for the LGBTQ community, to marry who you love who you love. Those freedoms are outlined, and I would absolutely support those. What I think is that the fear that the overturning of Roe created, that wave across the country, has coalesced more people to understand that when one right is attacked, all of our rights are attacked. When we attacked women's rights, we did start attacking, whether it's, segregated schools, as well as, gay marriage. These are all the things that everyone is concerned about when those powerful structures who have an agenda come together against all the people. And that is what makes me totally different. I didn't just show up as a Democrat like Mr. Uhlfelder a year and a half ago. I have been a Democrat. I have fought for democratic values, and I've always understood the issues that are connected to the Republican Party. When it comes to even those amendments, the two individuals who I'm running against, God knows whether or not they supported those. They did not support democratic values their entire careers. So these are the concerns about getting there. Electability is not just about your ability to win a general election. Electability is also about your ability to expand the electorate. And as the person who has run for office, won office, represented a community who is in the I-4 corridor for a period of 4 years, been in the trenches, been a past president of the Black Bar Association for the state of Florida. These are the issues and how we are able to expand the vote, to excite people to come out to see something different. This is not about being a moderate. This is not about being quiet and trying to be poised. This is about showing the courage, because this position is an advocate. This position is not let's work with both sides. It is about being an advocate for one person, and that is the people. That's the person, the people of Florida. And that's who I will advocate for, looking at these marginalized communities, including the LGBTQ community, and ensuring their right to marry, ensuring their right to exist, and most importantly, ensuring their right to be safe. As state attorney, it was my responsibility to oversee the review of the Pulse shooting. I saw the carnage. I saw the photographs, and there's no way that I would ever turn my back on a community who was targeted and shot and killed and lost their families. They have a right. That was their safe place, and I will ensure that the state of Florida is their safe place as well.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, same question, and once again, I'll ask you to address the potential revival of the 2008 amendment that defined marriage as one man and one woman.
Well, I think that's a horrible amendment. It needs to be addressed, and I think the right of privacy in our Constitution would supersede that. I strongly support same-sex marriage, interracial marriage. I'm married to a Black woman, so I don't want, and I love her very much, and I don't want any government telling me that I can't be married to her or love her. You know, I'm 65 years old today, by the way, and my life has been a process.
Happy birthday, Jim.
Well, thank you, Danny. And I've learned a lot in those years. I've been a trial attorney for 42 years, and yes, a prosecutor back in the 80s, but you know, I've been a criminal defense attorney fighting for people's rights for the last 30 years, and an adjunct law professor. So I think I have a well-rounded life, and I'm a maverick. I'll get you. And yeah, I've run for every political race out there except dog catcher. But every time I believe that it's the right thing to do. And maybe this is the right time for me. And I'm a bit of a maverick, and I'm not spending money, and I'm going to, lucky enough to get this nomination, go out there and just raise some cane as why Ashley Moody shouldn't be Attorney General again. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and I've had positions change over the years, but I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm comfortable who I am, and I think I have the experience on both sides of the issue in the criminal justice system, which I think is important. Mr. Uhlfelder's a great guy, Ms. Ayala, a great person, but they don't have the background in criminal justice that I have on both sides for all those years, trying all those cases. I'd ask you, how many criminal cases, murder cases have they tried? To see the criminal justice system right up front, how grimy it can be and how good sometimes it can be, and do the right thing. And I want to take this government of ours and this state of ours and make it a shining beacon on a hill. I'll use some Republican comment for that. You know, we can be an example. We are the third largest state. We have the resources, and that right now we have the Republican right wings trying to take us off a cliff. And if we don't get somebody up there who's electable, that can stand up. Nikki Fried's done a great job as agriculture commissioner, but Attorney General can do even more to stand up against the Republican onslaught, the right wings, the Trumpsters, to say Florida's not for sale. We're not giving you Florida, folks. We're going to remain a swing state. We're going to be a state where Democrats, independents, Republicans, we all have a say. Rich, poor, black, white, gay, straight, all of us, and not just turn it over to the right-wing Republicans that we're in danger of losing this state to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Daniel Uhlfelder, what did Aramis Ayala mean a minute ago when she said that she didn't just show up as a Democrat a year and a half ago like you did?
I don't know. You'd have to ask her, but that's inaccurate. I've been, they call me Ron DeSantis' chief tormentor. I would bet that I've gone after Republicans repeatedly. I grew up a Democrat my whole life until I did when I moved here to Walton County. At one point I switched parties because unfortunately you can't vote in Walton County unless you're a Republican. But no, I've been treated Democratic values. Even though I was registered Republican for a period of time, I've been Democrat since. It's been several years since I went back, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think it's who I am. I mean, I'm a Floridian. I mean, I'm a second generation Floridian. If you want somebody who has true their values, I started a PAC called Remove Ron to remove the governor. I traveled the state as the Grim Reaper to call out Ron DeSantis's failed policies. I fought Mike Huckabee to the point where he tried to take my bar license over private beaches. I'm on the front line here, folks, in North Florida. And I'm a fighter. And, you know, I was a Republican for a while. And I don't think that's who I was, you know, but it didn't change who I am.
All right, thank you. Martin Dykeman, your hand up. Turn your mic up.
I have a couple of follow-up questions for Ms. Ayala. One, if you would send us any documentation about that 60% figure you cited, that 60% of the Floridians are opposed to the death penalty. I'd like to see that documentation. But secondly, why did you withdraw from the fray when you did not run for re-election as state attorney in the Ninth Circuit?
When you say, why did I walk away from the fray? I don't understand.
Well, you were state attorney. You had a well-publicized and occasionally controversial tenure there, but you did not file for re-election. Why?
I did not for several reasons. The work that I did as state attorney in 4 years was exponential to the work that the ones who had preceded me, many state attorneys in the state for more than 30 years. The creation of a conviction integrity unit could be the one thing that a person did. The diversion programs from looking at, mental health, looking at drug addiction, refining the way that we train people, attorneys doing contextual training and implicit bias training, creating safe surrender opportunities for people who had pending arrests, fighting for domestic violence and changing the way that we prosecute those cases, creating the Brady list that, protects the officers who need to be protected, exposes the ones who need to be exposed. These are the things that I did in a 4-year term. And looking at my work, I was well satisfied to support the next state attorney who came in after me, who was building upon that work. And this is how we have to do in order to make change. I laid a foundation, became the first African-American state attorney, shattered the class ceiling, did amazing work while I was there. I left it to a person who's building upon it. And now, after representing my community, I have worked through the ranks and ready to represent the state.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've got an open-ended question for all three candidates. As you know, the Attorney General is an elected member of the Florida Cabinet, which involves a whole myriad of we could spend a whole hour discussing what Ron DeSantis has done to the cabinet itself as a viable instrument of government. But are any of you familiar with something that the governor and cabinet approved in the year 2015? It is known as the Widener settlement. Widener is a man named Matthew Widener. He's a First Amendment attorney in Sarasota, Bradenton. This is not meant as a gotcha question, but it's leading to something, and I just want to find out if anyone is familiar with what the Widener settlement entails.
Matt Widener is a close friend of mine and a supporter, so I've known him for a long time. So I don't know. I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
Tell me what that settlement involves.
I think if I stand correct, is it dealing with the public records and was it Rick Scott? Was that? Matt Widener is a maverick. He's a great. I don't want to. He's sued a lot.
Okay.
Is it dealing with he was trying to get records from Rick Scott and he got attorney's fees, I believe. Is that
right?
Okay.
I'll start with you, Mr. Uhlfelder. Here's the issue. The Widener settlement was a mediated settlement out of court as a result of a lawsuit filed by most news organizations in Florida over the illegal firing of a commissioner at FDLE named Gerald Bailey. That's what this involves.
Right.
And the other cabinet members at the time would have been Adam Putnam, Jeff Atwater, and Pam Bondi, 2 attorney generals ago. But there is a dispute behind the scenes at the moment as to whether the Widener settlement still applies. And one of the things in the Widener settlement essentially prohibits the governor and cabinet from using non-state email addresses to transact official business. And so I think from the news media's point of view, it is vitally important to uphold the principles of the Widener settlement to maintain some integrity in how the cabinet does business. It also involves it also prevents future governors from unilaterally doing something like firing an FDLE commissioner. So, Mr. Uhlfelder, I mean, how would you enforce or live up to the terms of the Widener settlement?
Florida has. I love Florida. If you can't tell it right, it's part of my family. One of the great things about Florida was when Ruben Askew, one of our great governors, pushed through the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law is so critically important to our state. It was actually so important that the federal government is. It is critical that we have open transparency as to what our government officials are doing. I don't believe if someone in the cabinet is I don't believe you should be doing non-government emails. I mean, how are you going to distinguish between what is private and public? No, I totally stand by the fact that that needs to be transparent. I understand they're trying to make small cracks in the Sunshine Law by recently allowing university president search committee proceedings to be private. That is abhorrent. Public universities are public universities. That's what they are. So the Sunshine Law, and as I've said before, I will have lawyers solely dedicated in my office because the Sunshine Law is so under attack by these folks to be a watchdog to protect, preserve, and make sure our Sunshine Law continues to not be chipped away at, but protected and enhanced in every form and fashion.
Okay, thanks. Jim Lewis, same question.
I remember the incident. I was not that familiar with the amendment. I certainly support the restrictions that all government business be done in the sunshine, that all emails be done on public emails. So I would strongly do whatever I could as Attorney General to make that happen. And really, cabinet officials, they've been pretty quiet. You know, it only seems that the governor is the only person that speaks for the state. And that's wrong. Cabinet officials, Attorney General, also very important. And I think they need to step up and be a little bit more vocal and a little bit more exposing of things like public corruption, especially the Attorney General. I see that as job number one. If you see public corruption, you're Attorney General, you darn sure better do something about it because that's your job.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ayala, same question.
Pardon me, but I will tell you that when it comes to public records, it is required. There, some people say, oh, the left hand should know what the right hand is doing. The people should always know what is happening on their watch. These are elected officials who speak for the people, and we should know what it is that we are saying, number one. I think that as Attorney General, what we have to do is begin to expand the repercussions and the consequences for violations of public records laws. Because of that, because I've been a state attorney and none of the others would know this to this degree. What happens is when those investigations are happening, we have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to use the manpower for what is only a first or second degree misdemeanor. And it ends up being not prosecuted to the fullest because it appears so minor. What we have to do is get into the legislature, elevate the penalties for this violation. Therefore, we can put the funding behind it. The consequences are there, and the people will know that their interest and their ability to know what is going on in those offices and with those elected officials is on top, and it's not behind closed doors, but we know what is going on. We have to have stiffer penalties for the violation.
Okay, Ms. Ayala, very briefly, name a former Florida Attorney General whom you admire and tell us why.
Definitely Mr. Butterworth. I think when Charlie Crist was the Attorney General, that was a lot of my introduction into statewide prosecution. The way that the offices were managing statewide prosecution, the standards were set. I do believe that there were efforts to hear from the people. There was the middle of the road that was not hyper partisan, but always for the people. I think that the standard has to be for the people, even if you are pushing a Democratic agenda. I'm a Democrat. That's who I am. I've always had these values, and this is who I will be. And I've worked my way to be the Democratic nominee, not just by chance. When we get there, that is what I believe was very powerful from those former attorneys general, is that they certainly use their power to include all people and to pursue justice in a consistent way.
Okay. And Jim Lewis, you've been around a very long time, as some of us have. Tell me an attorney general you admire and why.
Well, I certainly admire Bob Butterworth, who I worked for a number of years. But I'm going to really take you back. Jim Smith. Anybody remember Jim Smith? Boy, talk about a no-nonsense guy who basically stood up to anything that got in the way of the people. And you know, he was a strong guy, but he was always fair. And he was not a partisan guy. He wasn't somebody that ran to the left or ran to the right. He was in the middle. And like Bob Graham and Lawton Childs, he's the kind of leader that I think we need right now. We need somebody who's in the middle, somebody that stand up for people.
Okay, Daniel, same question.
Yeah, I would say, in my opinion, the gold standard for Florida Attorney General is Bob Butterworth. And I'm so humbled that he's supporting me. I talk to him regularly. I visited with him a couple months ago at his house. He's been advising me, helping me understand what is this, because he did it 3 terms. He did it with 3 different governors. And yeah, he's a great man. He's a great Floridian. I'm so happy that he's helping me in this campaign. Bob Shevin was a great attorney general. One of his former law partners, Sonny Holtzman, was one of the first people to call me and say I should, encourage me after I decided to run. Charlie Crist, I worked with Charlie Crist when he was attorney general on 2 civil rights cases, which I think that, and I'll go one even further here. And we haven't talked about her, and we probably need to, is I worked for a United States Attorney General. Her name was Janet Reno. She was a great Floridian. We've had some great Florida attorney generals that went all the way to become U.S. Attorney General. And I'm so proud to have worked with people like Janet Reno and these folks, and I will just honor their memory by doing just a little bit of what they did in office.
Okay, thank you. I want to just go around the room, round robin style, and just see if Chris, Daniel, Randy, Martin, Anthony have other questions. Go ahead, Martin. Turn your mic on.
I'll lead off. I'm very interested in what you all 3 had to say in agreement on establishing a conviction integrity unit on a statewide basis. I'm wondering whether you think you could be effective doing that strictly by office policy, or whether you would need to have some legislation, because the Attorney General really gets involved in cases only when they get to the appellate stage. Some have been closed a long time ago. Do you think you would need legislation for that?
I'm happy to take it since
I don't know who. Yeah, I didn't know who was going first. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm happy to take it since I'm the one who's experienced in conviction integrity. I do believe that we can move forward without legislation. However, the funding of it, the support of it, the public records aspect of it, because in the state of Florida, when a case is open, it is not, you don't have access to the public records. Conviction integrity cases actually are closed cases, which means that the public can get access to them while there's ongoing litigation. So we would need the legislature to determine some of the nuances as it relates to conviction integrity, the funding related to conviction integrity, but the work of conviction integrity does not need legislative approval or legislative work.
I get asked a lot of times on this campaign, can the Attorney General do this? Can the Attorney General do that? Do they need the assistance of another body of government? Bob Butterworth and Lon Childs in the 90s went after the tobacco conglomerate. I've talked with Bob Butterworth at length about people do not understand the breadth and extent of what this office can do. The constitutional restrictions are very, very limited. Notwithstanding have a book, certainly we can set up an office without that, without any other entity being involved. So yes, that would be done. We wouldn't need the legislature to do that. The Attorney General is on the cabinet, is on the Board of Administration, third in line to run the state of Florida. There are very few things that Attorney General, as the chief legal officer of the state, cannot do. And when I'm Attorney General, I will use that office judiciously. But if something as important as what we're talking about, I would move forward with that. And if there was any impediments in the way, I would work through them. But I don't think there would be many significant impediments to getting that established statewide.
Ready for me?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, I don't think legislation is necessary. I think it's your responsibility to look at every potential conviction that might be a wrongful conviction as Attorney General. I've been in that business for the last 42 years. I can remember as a young prosecutor in Orlando trying a case and starting to have doubts about it in the middle of my case based on what some witnesses told me, and dropping that case right in the middle because they didn't pay me enough to try to convict an innocent person. And for the last 30 years, I've been defending people's rights and trying to get people challenging cases and really understanding what sometimes goes wrong with investigations that causes innocent people to go to jail. And I've had innocent people that I've lost cases to that went to jail. And thank goodness we were able to change that and fix it. So I'm very experienced when it comes to wrongful convictions, how to fix it, and how to use the system effectively to undo injustices. And there are injustices in our system. Our system is not perfect, but we need to do more. And I think I have the experience maybe that these two folks don't have in being a criminal defense attorney in some pretty high profile, nasty cases for the last 30 years. It gives me maybe the heads up to do a better job in that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to recognize with a question. Go ahead, Jay Reddick. Go ahead, Jay.
Hi, had a question for all three of you, and we've covered a lot of ground today in terms of different issues and everything else. I was wondering for each one of you, what's one issue that hasn't come up that doesn't come up often in these sort of situations that's important to you that you think that you could have an effect on as Attorney General? And I'll start with Mr. Lewis.
Well, one of the things we haven't talked about is this marijuana issue. Back 12 years ago, I ran as an independent for Attorney General on the issue that we ought to legalize marijuana. And I guess in so many things in my life, I was before my time. But the system that we have now is corrupt, where basically we give contracts to a limited number of growers who happen to be friends of state legislators to grow the marijuana. We allow doctors to make money by doing these fake things about, oh, you need a script for it. All you have to do is go to any one of these doctors, pay them $150 and say you have headaches or stress, and they're going to give you that medical marijuana license that you need. Meanwhile, we're still prosecuting people for little dime bags of marijuana that cops pick up on the street. It's time we legalize marijuana. It's time we get away from this corrupt system and use it as an excuse to put people in jail, which that's what police are doing. They pull over people, they smell marijuana, and they use it as a way to try to strip away rights, to look for everything else. And sometimes it works. Sometimes they find guns and drugs. But you know what? It shouldn't be that way. Marijuana has been around. We know it's not serious, harmful. People ought to be able to smoke at home. I don't want people smoking in their cars or out in public. Let them smoke at home. But it's time we do away with the fake marijuana system that we have now and just finally legalize it once and for all.
Thank you for that. Ms. Ayala, same to you.
I think what we fail to talk about a lot is our environmental climate. And what us being Floridians, hugely important, not just for protecting our planet, but also for the economy. These are important issues for us with the rising tides. We understand we have hurricanes, and we also understand that our current Attorney General should be prosecuting federal violations here in the state of Florida, should be signing on to briefs when there are violations of the environment, should be making certain that those who take advantage of people in the midst of the hurricanes are not taken advantage of. So I think environmental protections and climate action has got to be a priority for Floridians and these discussions. And
Thank
will
you,
be
Ms.
for me as Attorney General.
Thank you. Mr. Uhlfelder.
I think one of the things we haven't talked about is what does it mean? What do we want people in the world, we want people in Florida to think about their leaders? We had a run of great leaders. I was so fortunate to get to know some of them. Leroy Collins, who was the first Southern governor to change his mind on segregation. And that he never was able to get reelected again just for being in a picture that they said he was in Alabama for a rally. Reuben Askew, Lawton Childs, Bob Graham, Janet Reno. We've had a history, but for the past 20 years, we've elected folks that don't care about Florida. People who are elected to take for public service for these positions, we should be looking to people that care. And I think all three of us care. And, I think I do not doubt that between any three of them. But the people that we're electing it because they want more power. People like Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, they are just anxious to get more and more power. And that is so dangerous to our democracy. We need to be electing Floridians, first of all, that have appeal to as many people as possible. Clearly, there's party systems, but once the one position that should be the most nonpartisan is this office, the Attorney General office. We should just be representing Floridians, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. We need to be proud of our leaders. We need to have leaders that care, that get up in the morning and say, hey, what can I do to make Florida better? Not what can I do to get elected to the next position, or what can I do for my donors? What can we do as leaders? What can we do to elect people that just say, hey, I care. I want to make Florida better for my family, your kids, whatever, everybody you can. And we are doing that in this state because of the money, because the Republicans raise so much money and they spend it so like it's, I mean, Ron DeSantis has $120 million he's raised. This system has been corrupted by money, but just because they may have more money, we are right on the issues. But we have to get our message to the people, and we have to put people up who can win and start to bring Florida back to a place where it's livable and it's a great place to be proud of.
All right, thanks very much. I'm looking at the clock. The clock's starting to be a factor. Chris Fluker, Chris, you had your hand up for a question. I think this should be the last question. Go ahead. Turn your mic on.
Thank you. I will just ask for a yes or no, and then the name of an agency. Florida's consumer protection laws delegate responsibility across a broad number of agencies. Most significantly, there are powers that are divided between the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services and the Attorney General's office. Do you think that this hurts consumer protection in Florida? And if the answer to that is yes, which agency would you combine consumer protection under? And let's start with Ms. Ayala.
I think that it is harmful, and I think that what we should do is keep it right close with the Attorney General's office, having it a sub-portion, because if we're directly connected and it is a priority, it should not be a subset of what we do. I think connecting it right in the office would make an absolute difference, because the oversight, the elimination of the corrupt behaviors, and being able to see what is going on and communicate to the people would make a huge difference.
All right, Mr. Lewis.
I'm going to agree with Ms. Ayala on that issue. I think it should be moved to the Office of Attorney General. And I think the Florida Department of Law Enforcement should devote more time to it as well. That we ought to be working more hand in hand with statewide officials on these issues as opposed to just with the local jurisdiction. So I think there needs to be better coordination, better statewide efforts. And I think the Attorney General is more appropriate than agriculture to really take up those issues.
Mr. Uhlfelder.
Well, I think it's a good question, but it really, ideally, you want as many agencies as possible addressing consumer protection. The problem is that we're electing people that don't care about it. So we could elect Ashley Moody, and she could have all the jurisdiction over the world of consumer protection, and that doesn't matter, as opposed to having Nikki Fried, who did care about it. So I think we should have as many, they should be delineated, what is one agency versus the other. But the critical issue is we aren't electing people in these positions that care about consumer protection. Nikki Fried clearly does, and she's done a great job as the sole cabinet. But it goes back to the question: who are we electing? For the past 25 years, we've elected people that do not care, in large part, about consumer protection. So I think it's important to have the distinctions. But it's more important to elect the people with the responsibility who actually are going to do something about it.
Okay. I want to thank all three of you candidates for being with us here this morning. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the thoughtful answers. Best of luck to all three of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.